Hey everybody, this is Crazy Beard from the Socialist Type House. We've got a couple of male feminists here to talk about feminist issues. We've got myself, we've got Ryan over here, Comrade Jambles, and we got Cog. So first, I think it's good if we just go around and kind of introduce ourselves. Crazy Beard, TikTok. Ryan,
I'm Ryan. My ad's right there. I'm also on TikTok.
Jambles,
Jambles at Heberhammer and Sickle. It's right there on TikTok. I'm also part of the Socialist Type House.
woohoo, and Cog.
Hi, I'm Cog. I'm Cog TCS. I'm generally found in the Simp Hype House of Jamble. So yeah, that's where you'll find us.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to be talking about some kind of, just trigger warning, some kind of tough things. We're talking about sexual violence and violence towards women, whether it's real life or, over the internet. I guess a good way to kind of start about it is I think we can all agree that it kind of starts as a men's issue, right? Like 90% of, I think the factor is actually 90% of sexual violence committed is by men, whether that's to women or to other men. I think that's probably the biggest reason why it is a man's issue. We have to do something to change the culture, change how men view masculinity and things like that. So I guess we'll just start with that. Anyone got any thoughts to add on to that?
Honestly, I think we kind of need like sexual revolution 2.0. Because the way we view sex nowadays, at least in my more liberal about sex point of view, is that it seems to be a very like a competition. That women are something to be conquested. And then guys take that a bit too close to heart, and so they go by any means necessary to fulfill that kind of de facto standard that they're trying to meet to even become or to be what's considered a man. And so I think, honestly, just not having such a competition, like a kind of a more, I don't want to say free love type thing, but just stop taking sex so seriously.
Yeah,
I think that's what that would be.
The whole notches on the bedpost thing.
Yeah,
that old thing.
Like body count lists.
Yeah, I hate that term. That term is
man.
infuriating. Well, we just lost James. I'm sure he'll be back. Cog? Thought?
Yeah. So in terms of men, mostly being the perpetrators, I think it's worth saying first of all that this has to be due to like a socialization. Like it has to be understood as a socialization issue, and it has to be understood first and foremost that like most of this rape is primarily about power, not pleasure, and that's the thing that I think most people are ignorant of, and that does explain a lot of why this is a men's issue, is because we occupy a position at like at the highest point of several intersectional hierarchies in our society, or like that's what we're sort of brought up to believe, and this is often like the starting point where a lot of these crimes begin. Yeah, and I think understanding it as a power relation really gets to the core of some of the unexplainable and horrific things that men do, both on and offline. But I'm not sure which one we're kind of dealing with first.
We'll definitely dive into both. But yeah, I would agree 100%. Rape is pretty much always about power. And it's unfortunate because it seems like the more we progress in society, the more that we kind of equalize things. It seems to be going backwards in the whole rape area. And I know some of that is because we just never talked about it before, right? Before the whole Me Too thing, I think a lot of people just stayed quiet. And I'm sure that the people that are talking about it are still a small fraction. But it does feel to me sometimes like the more we progress, the more we also go backwards. Does it feel like that to anyone else?
So if we're going to look at this from a power point of view, I think we can also look at it from like an enfranchisement point of view. because I think this would come back to like income inequality actually as well. Because if we look at the like proportion of enfranchisement that the average man has is minuscule when compared to, let's just say, the 1950s, for example. Like the scale in which there is a difference between the powerful and the powerless has been increasing exponentially, at least in an economic sense.
Yeah.
But I think that could certainly be a driving factor. Dare I say, capitalism hurts men.
Yeah. God.
And women, because women are, I guess, other men are the victims here. Whatever. Capitalism hurts people. Let's make it gender neutral.
There we go.
I guess I agree that there's power relations that exacerbate or decrease these things, but I would say there's also something to be said for the idea that actually the Me Too era is facing this kind of reactionary backlash from conservatives, not because, not because these things are being committed more as capitalism increases. Like they've been consistent throughout history. This has been a consistent problem throughout history, but because it's actually relatively new to regard sexual crimes as crimes and to take them with the seriousness that they deserve. I'm not sure exactly what it is for the US. I've got the UK figure in my head, but I mean, things like marital rape were only criminalized in the UK in 1992. And I think it was 2017 that upskirting was made illegal here in my country. It's that actually we've made some progress, but this progress has taken a long time, and the backlash is so severe because you've also got the weight of history pushing forward as much as you have the reactionaries pushing back. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting you bring up the marital rape. I just Googled it while you're talking because I was curious. So don't take this to to the bank or anything, but apparently marital rape is still somewhat legal in 8 states as of
Hold on, let me
2015.
Let me make a guess. It's going to be Mississippi, Alabama, Missouri, Georgia.
This actual
Utah.
article seems to only talk about Ohio.
You'd be surprised. Some of these states.
Oklahoma too.
Some of the states that have such reactionary laws aren't even necessarily the southern states. We have to remember that the U.S. as a whole is still largely very right wing.
Yeah,
so
and that's interesting too because if you look at, and we won't get too far into this, but if you look at the rest of the world and we'll take Cog's country for example, they actually have a workers' party. What we have is we have Democrats, which are blue Republicans, and Republicans. There's not a lot of ideological difference there.
They seem to blend together every election cycle, unfortunately.
Yeah,
at least mainstream wise.
But I guess we can start with talking about online kind of abuse. There's been a lot of things going on TikTok, especially. I mean, even in just the last month or so. I don't know. Does anyone know if that Devon thing is still going on? How many victims showed up for that? I know it's at least 3.
I'm about to say the number I last heard was 3.
Yeah.
Although he's been gone, so I think the problem has been thoroughly discouraged.
I think that there were a few people who came forward, but there were a lot more who.
There probably were, unfortunately.
There were confirmed that there are a lot more who. I'm not sure how at Liberty everyone who was involved feels comfortable talking about it. So, but
yeah, I hear him.
He definitely. And I think that this points to a larger problem on TikTok as well, is that there's a lot of young people on the app, and there are both a lot of young people who are kind of involved in either being producing or having predatory behavior, and then also people who are being preyed on.
Do you guys remember, God, what was his name? Politalk? his actual name, like his real name, was Brody Jones. He made the "Fuck Donald Trump" song or something like that. Do you guys remember him?
Uh, I do not.
So basically, his real name was Brody Jones, and he was a big anti-Trumper who was popular. Gosh, late 2019, early 2020. It came out that he had basically sexually assaulted three different masseuses in Canada, and the right wingers, they jumped on it. They were like, "See, this is why we don't trust Democrats. This is why we don't trust the left, because they're all rapists." And I don't understand why we always have to take it and make it a political thing. Like, this terrible thing that happens, unfortunately, happens on both sides. It happens. I mean, you can be, whoever you want to be. You can be a communist. You can be a, ANCAP. It doesn't really matter. You can still be a terrible human being. You can still do terrible things. Um, yeah. Thoughts on that?
Um, just semantically, I think the term we should better use more on like a partisan, not really politically, because everything is a political issue.
True.
But there does seem to be at least politics sphere wise, there's this kind of vilification of Democrats that Republicans use as a campaign tactic, if I
Yeah.
can put it in that type of way. So anything that turns partisan, it's usually the Republicans weaponizing something. And then that's actually pretty counterproductive to the movement itself. Is
Mhm.
making something partisan, you just create more conflict. There's no actual attempt for resolution. So,
Yeah, and I
well,
remember even back then when I spoke out against them, everyone was like, "Well, you're next. We bet you do it too." And it's like,
oh
yeah,
man, that's so
okay,
awful.
Bob. Like, I'm not even entertaining that. But yeah, it's crazy to me because I think that shouldn't be something we argue about. I think we should, all sides of the matter should sit down and say, look, there's people who are having their lives ruined. Let's try to fix the issue rather than blaming the other guy.
Oh yeah, there's a wonderful example of this that's kind of gaining popularity now. That is awful, but some conservatives are trying to associate pedophilia with the LGBT movement now,
Yeah.
even though there's been unanimous condemnation of any notion of the sort. It just seems to be another way to vilify like the LGBTQ community, and I think that a similar thing happens there.
It's a very old trick, actually, that's been used by the right wing for a very long time.
Actually, that is true. Yeah.
Yes, it was it's not just targeted the LGBT community, by the way. It's being directed at Muslims here in the UK. You might have heard of the whole grooming gangs thing.
Oh yeah, you can thank Sargon for that one.
Yeah, I can go into the whole I could go into that and like debunk it, because it's actually relatively simple to debunk. But the point is it's the association of Muslims with sex crimes, particularly paedophilia usually. But it's a similar thing that you find with if you look at Julius Streicher's Der Stürmer in from the Third Reich, you find the exact same pattern that invariably they would bring up or try to associate Jewish men with paedophilia and sexual crimes. So there is a flip side to it. Not well. I wouldn't say it's a flip side at all. But it can be used for partisan purposes and misrepresented. But that does as much harm. Associating it with a specific minority does as much harm as denying the existence of the crime in the first place. If you see what I mean.
Yeah, it's we're not actually addressing the problem here.
Yeah, and that's the big problem, is that it always feels like it's a scapegoat. It's never that men can just sit down and say, look, our culture's messed up. We have these ideas in our heads. Like, I honestly believe some of the stuff that happens, especially online, if we could just sit down and admit that we treat women like objects and achievements, like Ryan was saying earlier, if we could just sit down and admit that and stop doing that, things would get a lot better. Because it's horrible. And I won't get too deep into this, but I know at least 4 people in real life that have been sexually assaulted. One of them is a family member, and I can directly see in her life. Keep in mind, this happened to her 63 or 64 years ago. I can still see damage to this day, and that's why, like, sexual violence, it's not okay. it literally has a potential of ruining someone's life for the rest of their life.
I think, yeah. I mean, it's I can't disagree in any way whatsoever. Absolutely would not. I just want to pull it back slightly to the marital rape thing because I don't think I'm quite connected those two ideas very well. I was talking about the legality not being taken very seriously, and it seems that marital rape is still legal, maybe in some states in the US. I have to double check. But the point is about marital rape is it wasn't considered a crime because women were so regarded as property. And not seeing people as ends in themselves, but instead seeing them as means to an end, is precisely where this problem begins. And I say and ends, but in some ways it ends with a trauma that can last a lifetime. But yeah, I wanted to add on online abuse. Amnesty International have done some interesting research on this, and specifically in my country, the UK, I'm pulling it back to things I know because it's convenient for me. But you might have heard of a politician called Diane Abbott. Are we familiar with Diane Abbott?
I have not heard of her.
We're America centrists over here.
Okay. So
sorry, God.
Diane Abbott is a black woman. She was the first black female MP in the UK, and she receives a ridiculous amount of abuse. Absolutely ridiculous. She's a slightly older woman as well, so she falls at the bottom of several hierarchies. She falls at the well, I say the bottom. There's no sort of top and bottom, but she suffers oppression based on her gender, oppression based on her weight class, and oppression based on her race, of course. And it was found in 2017 that she suffered 50% of all the abuse directed at MPs on Twitter. That was one woman, 50% of all the abuse directed at MPs on Twitter. So I think, linking it back to the rape issue is, despite being what we might not call a conventionally attractive person. I'm not saying people couldn't be attracted to Diane Abbott, but what I am saying is that I don't think this was about attraction. The rape threats that she received were all about power, like all about power. I think there can be cases where the two get mixed up, like attraction and power. But power is like the key, like difference, the key element.
Common denominator.
And I think it's just worth bringing it back to intersectionality as well, because Kimberly Crenshaw's ideas of intersectionality play a big role here, because I think I'm right in saying that a white woman wouldn't have received that much abuse if she had the same size and following. You're
completely right. And there's actually a United States example of this too. I don't know who Dr. Jocelyn Elders is. She was the Surgeon General for the Bill Clinton, basically. She was also the first black woman to be Surgeon General. She did a lot of very progressive things for her time, things that we actually, like nowadays. She was all about sex education. She was all about transition surgeries, all sorts of stuff. She was a remarkable woman. But just like the example Cog gave, she was treated horribly. She was, she received death threats. She received rape threats. She wasn't taken seriously by anyone in Congress. She was, for lack of a better word, she was bullied. And like Cog was saying, the intersectionality of it is, unfortunately, it's bad for white women, right? But if you're a black woman who happens to be trying to do anything, it gets that much harder for you. It's just, it's horrible. By the way, it looks like we have a late entrance here. We got Tay. Actually, no, I can't add him. I'll put him in when I can add him. Go ahead. What were you going to say, Cog?
I was going to say it's part of seeing these people as less than human. Like, this is like why I emphasize like my sort of approach to ethics, which is a sort of Kantian framework, so much, is because one of the second formulation of the categorical imperative, or rules that Kantians like follow as moral duties, is to treat people as ends in themselves, never merely as means to an end. and this is just it. Is like part of the problem is that the like lower down and the more intersectional oppression these people face, the more likely they are to be treated not as people who are taken seriously and whose humanity is respected, but as ends in themselves. And like with Diane Abbott and with the example you gave, it's invariably a political angle as well. Like,
Yep.
I think you can talk about political sexual violence and it makes sense because it's directed for a political purpose. Like, it's to try to, whether they know it or not, whether the perpetrators know it or not, is to try to direct fear at them and to make them fall in line with how they think the world should be. Again, power.
And this goes back to TikTok too, because a lot of like the comments you'll read when you look at like just randomly out of the top of my head, like one of Gabby's posts where someone's saying something inherently sexual or whatever. I don't necessarily know if many of them are doing it for, like I was saying, attraction purposes, but I can tell you almost all of them are probably doing it because they want her to shut up, because she's a powerful woman saying some things that they're not comfortable with, and they're doing all they can to get her to be uncomfortable and leave or whatever it may be. And it's horrible because, I mean, I don't know how many of you guys know Gabby, but she's amazing.
I don't think
Oh,
she
yeah.
does not exist, but I know who she is.
She is pretty big on TikTok, but you would be surprised. There are people that don't know who she is.
Yeah, she's brilliant. We do stand Gabby all day, every day. Jambles, are you trying to say something? Sorry, you switched your microphone on.
Yeah. My mic or my thing has been extremely robotic. I'm trying to get on my laptop.
Well, we can hear you right now. We can hear you right now, so go ahead.
Oh, okay, cool. Honestly, I was just gonna add that I didn't even really know who Gabby was until I was in a Zoom with her the other night. So it's possible to not to not be that plugged in, I guess.
I mean, that is one great thing about TikTok, though. There are so many powerful women on that app. I could name quite a few. You got Gabby. You've got. I'll stay away from the younger ones, but you've got Gabby. There's her name is Rinstar, I believe. She made quite a few songs that are popular on TikTok. I can't remember what they're called right now, but I absolutely love that there are so many good, positive, like feminist figures on. On TikTok.
I was just gonna say I've been
Go ahead,
following
James.
I Eat Plutocrat since like the beginning of
Yeah,
my
she's great
TikTok.
too.
She's like the perfect blend of like sarcasm, but then like genuine commentary. It is chef's kiss.
There was one video
it's
she
like
did.
Lenin. It's like a modern day Lenin.
There was one video she did a while ago, and I think she said it was after a few drinks or whatever. And it was something where she was just, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was just kind of like a fuck you to some random dude. I'm like, that's awesome. I wish I could make good content drunk. I know I can't. But
Yeah, I do. She's brilliant. She's absolutely brilliant. What's her other account called? She's got I Eat Plutocrats and something else, but I'm not sure.
I peg something.
I peg
Plutocrats. That's it. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's the one where she
know
edited that
that,
video.
Yeah, that's her like more, I guess, like equivalent like a personal account.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, onto the more real life things. Again, trigger warning for anyone who's in here. I think the statistic is still 1 in 5 women will experience some sort of sexual violence in their life or sexual abuse. It's crazy to me that number is so high. Because like, if you're not actually looking into it, if you're not actually listening to people, some people go their entire lives without realizing it's an issue. My uncle, actually, I had to have a talk with him maybe a month ago or so, because he was saying some really not so great stuff on Facebook, and he was like, no one ever faces that stuff. Like, dude, I can name 3 people you know right now that have gone through it. And I mean, he actually like literally had kind of a bit of a breakthrough there. He had a moment where he was just like, oh shit, Has anyone else ever met somebody who just isn't aware of what's going on?
Mm, I don't know. I want to say like maybe my dad, but he's stubborn, so can't really get too close there, no matter how hard I try.
I feel like most people probably don't realize, like, I understand. It's really millennials and Gen Z tend to be more aware than any other generation. But I don't know if that would be like a. It doesn't run true for all millennials that I've met, and it doesn't, I think, run. Well, I'm sure it doesn't run true for Gen Z either. For example, I was having a discussion with a family member of mine a while back, and she weirdly was saying to me, because her sister is a police constable, and we were discussing like sex crimes against women, and she was saying, oh, I just don't understand why they don't just, surely you'd push them away and you'd get away. And it's like there's a very clear misunderstanding here about when most of these things, because you're most likely to be assaulted by somebody who is like a close family member, or a close friend or family member than any other person. You're not likely to be jumped by a random person. Sexual assault does happen, but more often it's people who are close to you. And also, there's a misunderstanding that people are simply like overpowered in the traditional sense, because there's lots of forms of power that you can be overpowered by, and it's not just about weight and muscle and pinning somebody down. As my cousin who's in the police said, like a lot of the time it's very difficult because the person freezes it up. It's like a fight or flight reaction, and there needs to be like a certain amount of education and sympathy with that, like with that perspective and understanding. And if a millennial doesn't understand that, somebody who's in like the boomer generation is really going to struggle to understand that, because they've got no like, in comparison, they've got like no understanding of sexual crimes as their own crimes rather than as sort of property crimes to some degree.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you there. I mean, I have there was, I mean, like I'm not going to go too into detail because I don't really feel comfortable, but I mean, something similar happened to me at one point. It wasn't like necessarily about physical overpowering, but it's also very much a mental thing as well.
Emotional like coercion can sometimes be more damaging than physical, because it's so much harder. Bruises heal. Words can leave a bit more permanent impact.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that both are like, I think it just depends on the situation, depends on how well you were able to cope with it and everything. But 2020 this has not been a great year for me, even before COVID. But it's just like it's emotional coercion, and the whole the entirety of I mean, like a lot of the times these are people who aren't people who are just complete strangers. It's not like somebody just like picked you up off the street. It's someone who you might be close, you trust, and you're near, and they can manipulate that to their advantage. And that's something that I think needs to be recognized a lot more, is that like it's not just like this. It's so much more nuanced and complex in the way that like all of it all works because of the fact that a lot of like times people tend to just assume that consent is being given or something like that, and that's not the case. Or that like I mean it's just
it brings up a really interesting point. Do you guys remember, maybe it was last year, maybe it was the year before, but recently there was a controversy about the song Baby It's Cold Outside, where the song is like, baby, it's cold outside. Will I really have to go? You're gonna catch a cold or whatever it is. You guys know the song, right? It's basically a song about how a man's trying to get a woman to stay with him. Right?
Yeah, it's a bit patronizing, but
There were a lot of people that were like, "Oh, the left has gone too far." And I'm like, "No, this song is terrible. Like it's a callback to a time where we didn't even try to not be, possessive of women. We didn't even try to give them any kind of consideration." But real quick, it looks like I see Tay now. I'm going to add him to the stream.
What's going on, everybody?
Hello, Tay. Sorry about the
Hey.
technical issues. This is our fifth guest. Tay, do you want to say a little bit about yourself?
Oh, like what? Just like my ex and stuff.
Like maybe your TikTok or
Okay. All right. Well, I'm the big socialist on TikTok. I have an Instagram, which I'm not really super active on. I only became super active on it when I joined the Simp Hype House. Also, I don't really know. I'm just like I'm honestly like I'm just a simple guy. So everything that I talk about in my videos, like I do a lot of research, but also I approach things from more of a human decency level where I'm just like, well, it's a lot easier for people to just respect pronouns or, to just not be racist and not be a misogynist. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for inviting
So
me.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
We kind of were. We were talking about a few years ago where that baby "It's Cold Outside" song kind of happened, and everyone was very kind of saying, "Oh, the left's gone too far. They're upset about a Christmas song." But like, it's a callback to a time where we just didn't even think of women's rights like at all. Does anyone have any comments on that?
Yeah, the controversial line in that one. I agree with the overall attitude of the era being like
Somebody's got a crying baby. Would you be able to mute yourself?
Sorry, guys.
it's okay.
Okay, I'll mute him for now.
Yeah,
We'll
sorry.
unmute him, but
Yeah, I agree with like the overall attitude being like one of women's rights not being taken seriously in the 1940s. But it's worth bearing in mind that the line of controversy in that particular song is the line "Hey, what's in this drink?"
Yes.
But "Hey, what's in this drink?" isn't at the time it wasn't considered a reference to spiking because it wasn't that much of a phenomenon like it is nowadays because you didn't go out in the same way that you do nowadays. But what's in this drink generally referred to a term for like, hey, there must be alcohol in my drink because I've wandered away from my chaperone. That was generally the way it was viewed. It's a term about walking away from your chaperone and being in a situation that you wouldn't usually put yourself in. It's not a reference to, oh, I think you've drugged me. I think it's worth kind of clearing that up. But obviously, interpreted through modern eyes, I can see how that's a really bad line.
Well,
and even, creepy song.
And even so,
Yeah.
We have to. The fact that it's like, oh, I've wandered away from my chaperone. This fact that like for some reason somebody has to be like a woman has to be watched. I think that you're right. It's probably less of an issue than in the historical context than it is now. But even so, when you look at things from today's perspective and somebody hears that line, they're not going to be thinking about it in terms of the 1940s. They'll be thinking about it in terms of today.
Yeah, and even then,
like a pretty harmful legacy for.
Yeah, and even then, it's like
okay to just get rid of the song. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like we don't have 20 million other Christmas songs.
That's true. Although I am quite a fan of some of the covers that have been done by women. Funnily enough, I don't know if you know who. What's Frivy Fox, Frivy Fox ASMR on YouTube.
Oh, I do know her. Yeah, I actually
Yes.
really like her ASMR.
Yeah, she does a cover with I think she did it with GB ASMR, but it's really really good. And yeah, apart from like but like you can enjoy problematic art. Like a lot of art we enjoy is very problematic.
Unfortunately.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I think at some point, it's like everybody's coming from their own perspective. So people find different meanings in art, and a lot of it is very problematic. But that doesn't mean that there aren't aspects of it to also be taken that are positive.
Right. So we're getting a little more than 3/4 done here. So I just kind of open the floor. Does anyone have any topics that they want to cover that we haven't gotten to yet on this topic?
We could go down the road of like spiking drinks and like how that's become a phenomenon, because that kind of seems like a logical launching point. Like, does anybody have like thoughts on why this has become such a problem?
I'd love to talk about Brock Turner for a moment. He didn't. I don't think he necessarily, drugged anyone's drink, but he took advantage of, a passed out woman, and he basically got no time. Right? He got a slap on the wrist, and it's just. I remember seeing that verdict. I remember everyone was pissed as all get out about it, and I was expecting, okay, well, since everyone's mad, we're gonna do something about it, right? We're gonna put him back in jail. We're gonna do something, right? But as far as I know, Brock Turner is still free as of today. And he's faced almost no consequences. And I just always ask, right, but that's basically nothing. I just always ask myself, why? Like, if a man faced something like that a woman did, this would be different, wouldn't it be?
Right, and I think that it's also very clearly a not only an issue of I mean, okay, so I think that there are a few routes to go down. Well, one, that it's clearly an issue of the clear amount of privilege that Brock Turner had, being in
rich parents or something.
Oh, I think he had rich parents, but it's also an issue of white supremacy. That the fact that like people who are committing, I mean, like these are crimes, and we can see that people who are black are being sentenced at extremely higher like rates, both in terms of the actual sentencing time, even if they are sentenced at all, for these exact
real quick. And I don't mean to interrupt you, but just to jump off that point, trigger warning. But this goes back to Emmett Till, who got hung for whistling at a white woman.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous, but go ahead. Sorry about that.
And I think that it's also kind of it's also strange because we're seeing this weird like cognitive dissonance almost between people who are. This is just something to sit with. I'm not really sure what the correct answer is here, but like people, are calling for the abolition of. People are calling for the abolition of prisons and for the abolition of all of these carceral institutions, but then at the same time are calling to arrest anyone who does anything, and it's just like something that I'm not sure what the correct answer is here. I don't know, because is a punitive response even the one that's actually going to restore justice whatsoever for anything that's being done?
Mm-hmm.
I think that what most people want is for it to be judicially consistent. Like, I think that's the thing, is make the punishment like fit the crime. Well, not even the punishment, make the response fit the crime.
Yeah.
I mean, like the Alabama abortion law that was attempted to be passed in 2019 was a law which said that that a doctor performing an abortion could get 10 years for attempting to perform an abortion and 99 years for successfully performing an abortion. Now, luckily, that the law was struck down, but when you consider that Brock Turner got 6 months,
Yeah.
I just can't. I can't make the jump there. I just can't see how that's consistent.
It is, if I can quote Andrew Neil from his legendary Shapiro interview, barbaric.
Yeah, that's a great one. That's the one where Andrew Neil basically makes Ben Shapiro almost cry. But back on topic for a moment. So going back to Brock Turner and like drink spiking and things, I know recently things have been much more, because Me Too happened, right? Things have been much more in the open, and we've been talking about these things. But there's still so many movies, TV shows, all that media where these jokes are made, where it's like, oh well, if you can't get laid, just drug your partner's drink. Like, I think the movie was Seth Rogen, and it was 2008. They actually showed, and I don't think they showed like the penetration, but they showed basically sex of Seth Rogen fucking a drug person. And like, it's crazy to me that recently that it was funny, right? And have you guys noticed that even though in the Me Too era we still seem to see that stuff in media?
I don't think I'm aware enough to notice it a lot of the time. But what year was that?
I think it was 2008. I can Google it real quick.
2008. Sorry, let Ryan and...
The media is such a complicated subject. It's like, where do we draw the line between
2009
art and absurdity?
And it's called Observe and Report.
As in, there can be a legitimate like artistic representation as like a story device to show a very dare I say, like kind of explicitly rapey scene if it fits the story. But with the Seth Rogen movie, it's like, I doubt that was really necessary. Like
No.
for Game of Thrones, for example, some of the scenes that were pretty rapey could be considered, storytelling devices to really flesh out characters.
Mm-hmm.
But then you'd have stuff like, I'm just assuming here, I haven't seen the movie, of course, but like the Seth Rogen movie, it was probably just making a rape joke.
It's a punchline. It's a punchline.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not a storytelling device. It doesn't serve any greater purpose in the greater artistic medium. It just seems there to be there, and that doesn't seem very correct, because it seems like more of like a bastardization of comedy, even.
Well, I even remember 2009. I was 17 or 18. I remember being horrified. I'm like, how is this okay? Like, I mean, I get that you're trying to be a comedy. You're trying to take extreme takes on things, but there comes a point where certain things have to be off limit. And I think, at least as far as like, date rape goes, that should be something maybe we put a limit on,
Especially like, I'm assuming it's going to be a very passive reference to it.
Yeah.
And,
and I think too, this is something that was brought up earlier. I think that maybe we can jump into it as well, as why the prevalence of like drugging people has become such a big thing in the past like I don't know, like 50 or so years. I don't know if you had anything to say on this, but
this is going to sound super insensitive, but it might just be an efficiency thing. It's just the easiest way to have your will with someone.
Yeah, I mean, it might come down to also like egos and things, because we talked about it earlier. Men seem to put a lot of weight into their sexual conquests and whatnot.
There's a massive competition between males.
Right. So I feel like maybe some people look at it, and this is not okay, I'm not condoning this, but they look at it as, like you said, an efficiency thing. It's the best tool for the job, so to speak. And that's
the competitive edge, a product of competition, if I dare say.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
capitalism.
And I think more than that as well. I mean, it definitely is something to do with like the production of substances like this, the ability to create things that and the new drug research that has exploded in the past like since the 1950s, really. we not only have, I mean, because before then, like barbiturates were like the only, like sedatives that were commonly available to most people, and now we have tons. There's been like increased production of all of these different types of things, which I think have very valid medical uses for a lot of them, but at the same time, it's very easy for people to get their hands on them, especially when they are not regulated by any specific, like government agency. A lot of it is, a lot of these things are produced not by big pharma, even, although some of them are. A lot of the ones that are being used in these situations are,
So Tay,
unsafe, unregulated.
Yes.
are you done, James? I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, yeah, you're good. You're good.
You've been kind of having some technical difficulties. So we were talking about the prevalence of spiking drinks. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Honestly, yeah, you were right. Brock Turner, he faced like little to no charges whatsoever. Honestly, I think that it's just like, I don't know. I haven't really spoken on spiked drinks per se. So like, just like the drugging in general, it's awful. It's awful when like a woman does something like that. Like, people will judge you, and then like a man will do something like that, and just like they'll get rained down on with privilege.
So it's kind of funny, the drug drink thing. I just remembered. Have you guys noticed the trend that women are doing, saying these are the men I would trust with my drink? It's so weird that that's the bar. Like, that's the bare minimum you can do to be a nice guy.
Right.
Yeah. I don't like those comments.
Yeah, they weird me out. It's like,
I've gotten a few of those. I've gotten like, "Oh, I trust you with my drink," and I'm like, "Thank you," but it's like,
I'm flattered, but why is this necessary?
yeah,
yeah, it's scary though. I get tagged in those every now and then, and in the Simp Hype House we get tagged all the time.
Yeah.
In those, and
and
I don't know, a lot of times I just don't know what to say, because I don't drink anyway. So.
And like responding. Yeah, I've been taken to like responding deflectively and humorously with like deflectively and humorously with like a something along the lines of, well, you shouldn't trust me with your drink because I will run off with it and I'll steal it and drink it for myself, which isn't what they mean by the phrase, but it's like adding an element of humor to it just to like deflect, because I don't know how to respond.
That seems to be the most appropriate response, especially because a lot of the people you interact with on TikTok are minors, for example.
Oh yeah.
You can always.
There's the one where Garrett's feet on the Simp Hype House. I think he made a video with like saying, "Oh, thank you, but I actually already have two drinks in my hand." He had like 2 bottles of water. It's like stuff like that. I mean, it is a weird phenomenon that I've noticed, but I also feel like it's kind of it's just so strange that is literally the bar. Is that like you cannot trust people with your drink? Like,
and it's really scary too, because Ryan brought up that most of these girls are minors, right? Like, they're already worrying about it, and they're not even of age to have to worry. Well, hopefully have to worry about it.
Yeah. We can also just talk about like drinking in general.
Yeah.
Because people, like, you talk about spiking drinks, and that is a huge issue. But alcohol itself is a spiked drink. It's like alcohol is an intoxicant, and it is one of the most dangerous drugs to consume. Just because it's socially acceptable doesn't make it any less dangerous. So.
Oh yeah, I'm underage to drink myself, and all my friends like to indulge, but I just stay away from it because it kind of scares me a little bit, admittedly.
I would also say to remember, and I know no one here is like this, but never victim blame. I don't care how many drinks someone's had; it's never okay to violate them.
Oh my gosh, I do videos like that all the time. Like my thing is victim blaming is whack.
Yeah.
But As far as the trusting with the drink thing, I always think to, but I never do it. But to just take the kosher route and just be like, that's degenerate. That's degenerate behavior. I don't
Drinking is
partake.
degenerate. I will not have any of that in mine.
Degenerate has no place from the socialist movement.
All right,
No
Hunter.
place for alcohol.
All right, so
I mean,
we do
yeah.
have just one question, and we'll start wrapping up. And then I'll put it on the screen real quick. They ask, how would legalizing prostitution curb these things? I don't know the opinion of everyone else here, but personally, I think that if men had a safe outlet, the people that are thinking about doing these things and are premeditating it, they may go to somewhere where it can be monitored, where the woman can be, protected in a way. We did a whole debate about it, Hungry Ray and I did, so I won't talk too much on it. But thoughts?
I haven't.
Go on, go on.
Well, I haven't seen the data behind it because I've heard some conflicting things from different people. I haven't seen the data, but from a purely praxeological perspective, it logically follows that usually when you legalize things, it tends to help the actual problem itself.
So I don't mean to interrupt, but I actually do have stats on that from that debate. I think Sweden is a country, or it's one of the countries that legalized it. They saw a 30% decrease in sexual violence over 2 years.
I only hesitate is that I've seen the data points about where it could increase sex trafficking. I'm not really sure about the validity of those, so I'm not going to.
It's been a while since I've done debates. So I can't remember my original.
But yeah, I guess if the idea is to make it safer for the sex workers, to make it at least a less tabooized for the sex workers too, then you would think that we would have a more safer avenue for people who are in that mindset to kind of take advantage of people, to exert their sexual frustration in a manner that could be considered consensual, or that I guess would have to be, and that would just be better for society overall.
Well, I think also if we're looking at I think that legalizing sex work is absolutely something that should be done, both in terms of prostitution and other forms of sex work, which are either in gray areas or already legal. But it's also important to note that, any form of work under a capitalist system isn't truly consensual. But I think that doesn't necessarily mean that sex work is not valid. We just have to keep in mind that the pressures of a monetary exchange like that it does commodify sex.
I think it's worth bearing in mind that although I agree with the decriminalization and legalization further than that of sex work, I don't think it would make any difference to the actual rates of sexual assault spiking in clubs, because I think it's just such a different phenomenon from what you it's an exercise of absolute power for very limited output on the part of the criminal, on the part of the perpetrator. And I think it's a very different thing to what you'll find somebody who's approaching a prostitute would find. They're looking for a pleasure outlet generally, not a power outlet, although there's obviously some crossover between those two. I think, I don't know, maybe it's because, might be oversharing a little bit, but I've actually been in a club and I've been swapping drinks with people, and I've been spiked. I've had it happen to me in the here in the UK, and although I know what you mean by the fact that you said that alcohol is like an intoxicant, and it's also, it's also can be very damaging, and can be a sort of a spiking element. Being spiked, in my experience, was so much worse, because you just lose all control of everything. I've no idea what I was given, but I just lost all control of everything. I was blacking in and out. I remember a security guard asking me, have you taken anything? Have you taken anything? And I was like, no, I've just had alcohol. And I remember sitting like in a pile outside the club, just like being sick, because it's like you can barely do anything else. And luckily I was with some of my housemates at the time, and they were able to like get me into a car and get me back. But I've no idea if I was the target or if it was one of the people that I was with. But it is just such a strange thing to go through, and it is significantly well. I say it's significantly worse, but it depends what happens to you after it happens.
Right.
To be spiked by a drug or whatever I was spiked by.
Yeah. I think.
Yeah.
Go on. I was just gonna say, I think that part of it also is the fact that people who drink are knowingly drinking. They're buying drinks for themselves, and when a drink is spiked, it's something that you don't know that's being put in your body. Some people take, drugs that are used to spike for fun, which I'm not encouraging at all. I think that's a horrible idea, but at the same time, yeah, I mean, it's also just like about knowing how in control you are going to be of your body and having that mental preparation that's just taken away from you when you're spiked, when your drink is spiked.
Yeah. Really quick, I would just like to answer the question. I'll just kind of be piggybacking off of like Cog and Crazy Beer. Definitely, I don't agree with capitalism, but I do agree that sex work should be legalized.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like in the event that it were, I think that they would do like research and take those extra dangers into account. Whereas like if you check it out with like the legalization of marijuana. See, when the places that are like legal now that have like dispensaries and stuff, they take extra precautions as well to like make sure that they keep the store owners safe and the products safe. And I feel like not to like compare women to like weed or anything, but I'm just saying like people know the dangers of sex work like countrywide. So I feel like if they did legalize it, it would only be right to like take those extra steps to make sure that the workers are protected, and also to like take extra steps to make sure that you're penalizing the people who do hurt people.
Cool. So Cog had one more thing he wanted to bring up, and then we'll start wrapping up. Go ahead, Cog.
Funnily enough, it's funny that you should bring up penalization, actually, because that's kind of linked to what I'm about to bring up. I wanted to quickly cover sex crimes in international law, because it's something that's very briefly often discussed in these things. It's often viewed on a micro level, but what a lot of people don't know is that up until the year 2000, sex crimes were usually prosecuted under international law as a form of torture. Under the Geneva Convention in 1949, that was the specific legal doctrine it was prosecuted under, but that doesn't actually fit the definition of a sex crime. It doesn't fit the right definition, because torture is usually used as a means to obtain information, although there can be crossover. And it was the ICTY, which is the International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia, and I think the ICTR was involved as well. So the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda established it as a statutory norm to observe sex crimes as their own crimes for the first time. So my point is, this is all very recent. It's very recent in international law as well. This is like reflective of this thing of like millennials and boomers being the first millennials and Gen Z being the first generations to sort of take this very, very seriously. And in I think it was in 2011, the ICTY and the UNMS, which is the United Nations mission in Sudan, stated that sexual crimes have to be charged as their own separate crimes, and not as a subsidiary of like torture or genocide, precisely because they won't be prosecuted by law if they're considered as a subsidiary of these things. And so you put yourself in like a really difficult legal position whenever you're trying to prosecute these things. I guess kind of my point is with this is that all of this, even the legal stuff, is relatively recent and wasn't taken seriously as its own crime until relatively recently.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you bring up just the recentness of that, because like you said, it really hasn't been addressed until millennials and Gen Z. I'm glad that that's continuing. I'm glad that we're doing that, right? But it's crazy to me that like I almost feel like we should call it torture. I know we can't legally because, like you said, it doesn't get prosecuted correctly. But it is kind of torture, right? Like when you think about it, it's such a heinous crime that, in my opinion, I'm not usually for like harsh sentences or anything. I'm more of a rehab person, but when it comes to like stuff like this, I start feeling myself go a little more to the direction of, yeah, let's put them in jail forever because I don't want them going back out and doing it.
Yeah.
Very off topic. I apologize, but yeah.
No, I completely understand where you're coming from. Like honestly, like because of the aftermath of an actual sexual assault, because it affects that person whether we want to believe it or not. It affects that person for the rest of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like at a certain point it is like a form of torture.
Yeah. Cog, can I ask? So when it was torture, it didn't get prosecuted very well. Is it just because it was overcharged and it was hard to prove torture, or?
It was more that it would be easier to prosecute as part of torture, but then you wouldn't actually have that brought up at all. The same way, in a way, it's similar to how genocide wasn't considered a crime against humanity for a very long time in international law and was considered a subsidiary crime of war, a methodical crime of war, which we now recognize genocide as its own crime with a certain amount of required recognition within international law. And
it's about directly addressing it.
Yeah, it's not addressing it as it should be addressed within international law and deserving of its own specialist groups, which is kind of what the United Nations mission in Sudan was kind of advocating, was having their own specialist groups to investigate and carry through investigations specifically on sex crimes committed in these countries because it's so prevalent. On torture, I think I'd agree it's a good way of like understanding it, even if it's not like a good legal definition. It's a good way of understanding it, particularly where there's sex crimes committed against minors. I think understanding it as torture is a good way for people to wrap their heads around it.
Yeah.
I mean, it is. I mean, like, PTSD, like that's what a lot of people develop after. I mean,
and it can be with you forever. Like I said, I know someone who's been dealing with it for at least 60 years.
Yeah, it's psychological,
Which is why, to kind of wrap this all up and put it in a nutshell, this is why we as men just have to get this crap under control. Because until we do, there's going to be people that, whether they're men or women, they're going to be in fear. And I think it's important to mention, last thing, this sexual violence happens to trans people too.
Yes.
And it's usually committed by, unfortunately, cis men.
Yeah, it's alarming, the numbers on that.
But with all that said, does anyone have any final thoughts as we start wrapping it up? We'll go around the table. We'll start with Ryan.
Okay.
I'm hesitant to we said we had to deal with it, as men. I'm hesitant to make any statements where it's like, taking personal responsibility. When we're talking grand scheme of things, I'm very materialist, and people are product of the conditions in which they're brought up in. And so I think that it's going to take a lot of work to kind of eliminate this very competitive nature to humanity. Even, the more I read, the more I think, the more I hate competition as a concept. Even I much prefer mutualism, or the mutual aid, if we can put it into Kropotkin terms. And so I think it's going to require a major cultural shift away from this very competitive spirit. And then I guess I'll leave it there.
Awesome, Cog.
I guess like bringing it all back to this idea of like men and the power that we have. We exercise a lot of social power in society compared to our counterparts, on the basis of being men, and on the basis of all of us. I think we're all cis men. I think I'm right in saying we're all cis men here. We exercise a lot of power on this basis, and so we have to be the counterpart, I think, to when our power is exercised in the wrong way, and that's when it's used to exploit, to dominate, and to establish power and control over minorities and over other people. And we have to take it the other way and use our power that we are granted, use our privilege to bring about consent and education, and making sure that we're practicing that within our own circles of friends and men as much as we are in formal settings like this.
Yep.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Cool. Tay?
Oh, I was gonna let James go first. I don't mind going last.
Well, James, if you want to go first, go for it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I agree with both what Ryan and Cog said. I think that it's really important that we have to. It really is. It is going to be a cultural shift that needs to be, I guess, initiated by us and by many other people. Hopefully, everyone who's watching this or will watch this can learn, like a little something, and also try to just like talking about it is really important with anyone that you can, and like making sure that there is an understanding of what that people should be working together rather than competing, as Ryan said, as this idea of mutual aid that will end up creating more beneficial society for everyone than competition ever could. That just because we are competing doesn't necessarily mean that the end result will be a better thing, and that working together and that making sure we can mitigate harm as much as possible by not taking advantage of anyone. That's like the most important thing, and rather than using the societal power that we have to our advantage, we use it to the advantage of not just ourselves but everyone else.
Yeah.
Okay.
Honestly, yeah. Once again, I just I agree with the thought that it's up to us as far as men to just like kind of stand up and use our platform and our privilege in order to lift up women and minorities, and to just like be the change that the world needs.
Yep.
Like honestly, it's like it's and I understand because like I kind of used to have like this like timid background where I didn't really speak out much against things, and I think it just takes one time for you to just like literally just speak out, even in your circle, to just speak out against something that's not right, and then from there you get a little bit more comfortable and you can start speaking out more often. But yeah, it's definitely up to us though to not only lift up the voices of people who aren't able to, but to protect those people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's kind of a good capstone. You guys said it perfectly. We as men just have to kind of get things together. With all that said, we did actually forget to talk about something. We forgot to talk about Izu, but we'll probably do one of these maybe next month, and maybe if you guys want to come back, absolutely. But with that said, I'm going to go ahead and end the broadcast. Everybody have a wonderful day.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We'll still be in the studio. You don't have to quit.
Oh, okay. Oh,